When you are writing anything that includes researched information from an external source, along with your own synthesis information, it is important to know how to label each of your sentences so that your readers are able to distinguish your original information or ideas from the researched information that you include. And it's important for others to be able to find out which facts you included are associated with each of your works cited or bibliography resources. In-text citation is essentially a labeling or coding for sentences that are researched. Citing other people's ideas not only gives them their due credit, but it also strengthens your thoughts and opinions because you are backing them up with some expert thinking. In this color-coded example, I've highlighted information that I included for my research sources to distinguish between my summary and synthesis and the information from my researched sources. I also color-coded my sources so you can see which source each bit of my research came from. Color coding shows this very clearly, but some academics don't like rainbow highlighted papers, so to do this normally, we use MLA in-text citations to code researched information to the resources you list on your works cited page. So if you include a sentence or phrase in your writing that you wrote using a research source, you'll need to label that sentence so your reader knows which source that information came from. Let's take a look at how we can do that by starting with my works cited page. This is a list of all of the sources that I have referenced or included in my writing. You may have looked at more resources than this when you research, so these should only be the ones that you actually quoted or referred to in your writing. MLA style seems to change every year or so instead of trying to memorize MLA format, invest your time in learning how to use a really good works cited creation tool like EasyBib, which is what I use to make this works cited page. Let's start with a typical citation like this list of various phobias that I pulled from the book Phobias by Gail Stewart. This is researched information, so I need to put in a citation which indicates that and where I found the information. Typically, your citation will include just the first part of your works cited entry, which in this case is the author's last name. I put that in parentheses, and I also need to include the page number or numbers where I found the information. I found those phobias listed on pages 14 to 15, so I'm going to add that to my citation. I then close my parentheses and put a period. Notice that I put that period after the parentheses, not before it. That is because we need to connect the citation with the sentence, and if I were to put the period first, I would actually separate my citation from the sentence that it goes with. So always put just one period after the parentheses, not one before and after, just one after. Also, don't put a comma between your author's last name and the page number. All you need is just one space. Now let's look at another example where my source does not have an author. I used a direct quotation from the Mayo Clinic's website here, but the website did not reference a specific author. When you are creating an in-text citation, just remember that you only include the very first part of the entry on your works cited page. This is usually the author, but if an author isn't given, and authors often aren't listed on websites, use the title instead. Don't include URLs or dates or anything else, just the very first part of your works cited citation from your works cited page. Make sure you format your title just like you did on your works cited page. So if you used quotation marks, use those again. If you used italics for your title, use those. For all electronic sources, you do not add any page numbers. Since this is indeed an electronic source, I will not put in page numbers. I will simply end my parentheses and add a period. Now let's look at one way you can do an in-text citation without a parentheses. In this sentence, I already introduced my research information by adding in according to the author. Since I've already connected the author and the researched information, it would be redundant to again add the author at the end of the sentence in parentheses. However, if this wasn't an electronic source, I would need to just include the page number in parentheses at the end, but since all electronic sources don't have physical pages, I simply end my sentence. In that earlier sentence in my introduction where I referenced the Mayo Clinic before my direct quotation, I still did need my parentheses because remember, you have to always include that very first part of your works cited citation, and for that resource, it was the title of the website, not the publisher or the Mayo Clinic. So I still did include my parentheses at the end of that sentence that corresponded with the title of the website where I got my information. Before I wrap this up, let me cover a few unique situations that you may run across. If you have a very long title or a long list of authors, you can shorten your citations so they do not take up so much room in your parentheses. You can use the first few words of your title. If possible, look for a logical place to truncate your title, such as before a colon. And if you have 3 or fewer authors, you get to list all of their names like this. But if you have 4 or more authors, use the first author's last name and then add ETAL period, which means and others in Latin. Those are the in-text citation basics. Make sure to avoid these common mistakes in your writing. Mistake number 1, putting a comma between the author and the page number. It is not necessary and not correct, so leave it out. Just put a space. Common mistake number 2, putting the period before the citation or before and after it. 99.9% of the time, you will simply have your in-text citation and then the period. The only exception is if you are ending your sentence with a direct quotation and that quotation itself ends with an exclamation point or a question mark. In only that case, put in the exclamation point or the question mark and then your citation and then your end punctuation. Remember to cite all of your sources, which include information that you learned from researched sources. The purpose of this is to show which parts of your paper are researched, and this will strengthen the claims you make in your own writing. And it will give the proper credit to those you referenced in your research.